Hey guys, today I want to answer a question I was asked so many times. What do you think about processed food? In my opinion, processed food can be both good or bad, and it is dependent on your individual goal. It's even about the same food. You can take the same food and in one context or for one person it can be good and for the other person it can be bad. In general, my definition of good processed food is that all the nutrients that are beneficial for this person are left there and all the nutrients that are disadvantageous for this person are removed. And the same applies for bad processed food. All the nutrients that are bad for the person and this person's goals are there and everything that is beneficial has been removed. But it depends really on the person and the person's goal. Let's take sugar as an example. If you ask most of the people, everyone will tell you sugar is bad. Sugar is processed food, you shouldn't eat any isolated sugar. If you take table sugar, there is this sugar beet, which is a plant, a vegetable, and then all the good stuff is removed, like fiber for example, to obtain isolated sugar. So for most people it is bad, especially if the people don't move enough and eat too much sugar, that craves sweet cravings, that they don't eat enough of other healthy foods, they gain weight, they get unhealthy. So for most people is sugar bad. But there are exceptions to it. Let's take endurance athletes for example, who run a really long race or cycle or swim or whatever they do. Many endurance athletes have to have a constant energy supply during long races. And there is a problem. Many endurance athletes have problems with fiber during races, so they get digestive distress. So if one would just take a whole fruit and give an endurance athlete to fuel during the race, they would probably get digestive distress from it and their performance would drop. Also in a whole plant, the sugar isn't so concentrated. They need something they can fuel with really quickly and that gives them lots of energy. So sugar is actually the ideal nutrient for them. And here you can see actually the difference. For most people, sugar is bad, but for some people, sugar is actually very beneficial for certain settings. That's why I divide good and bad food processing depending on the person and the person's goals and lifestyle and who this person is. Let's take oil as an example. For many people who are dieting, oil can be bad. Not because oil is bad per se. I've made a video on this topic, I can link it below. But just because oil is really low in volume and gives you lots and lots of calories. And if you're dieting and you cut weight, just half teaspoon more of oil or half a tablespoon you put accidentally in your food can actually not really ruin your progress, but slow down your progress. So people who diet should be very careful with oil. In this case, oil is probably for them a bad processed food. But on the other hand, oil as an isolated nutrient makes really easy for you to get a healthy fatty acid profile in. I spoke about it in one of my previous videos and I will link it down below as well, because you should have a really balanced fatty acid profile to be healthy. So you should have saturated, monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fatty acids. And if you're running short on one of these different fatty acids during the day, then you can actually take just the oil that contains lots of these fatty acids and just add a little bit to your food, and it makes life so much easier. For example, I have always coconut oil at home because it has saturated fatty acids. If I'm low on saturated fatty acids on this day, then olive oil has lots of monounsaturated fatty acids. And for example, hemp oil has polyunsaturated fatty acids. So if you have these three kinds of oil at home, then you combine them, or at the end of the day, add the fatty acid type that is missing through one of these oils to your diet, and it makes it super easy. An additional thing about oil is that it makes everything taste much better. And if a person doesn't eat vegetables at all, then it makes sense to add a little bit of oil to it to make a person like the veggies more, because veggies are so important and I would rather add a small amount of oil just as a trick to make it taste better for people who don't like veggies at all. Then in this context, oil is again good processed food. Another saying I'm asked about pretty often are protein powders, because many people say protein powders are isolated, protein powders are processed, protein powders isn't real food, so is it bad? Well, in my opinion, it's again goal dependent, but in general I consider actually protein powders as good processed food because they make it so much easier to add protein to your meals. And the most important thing is that your meals have already like lots of nutrients, lots of vitamins, fresh vegetables, fruits, so you get all your essential nutrients in and don't, eat protein powder as your major food source. In this context, it would be bad, but in general, I don't see any problems with protein powders. They make it really easy to get protein in if one is on the way, doesn't have time to cook, or even if you have a really great meal and it's a little bit low in protein, then you could have just half a scoop of protein after your meal as a shake. I don't see a problem with it if your meal is in general healthy. A problem with protein powders is that they aren't as satiating as whole food, for example. So people who diet and they are low in calories, they are in general hungry, and then if they rely on protein powders too much, they may end up hungry. But even in this case, they just should eat a lot of vegetables, because vegetables are filling and satiating. So the important thing is not to rely too much on protein powder as your major food source if you are on a diet. But other than that, if you have a healthy diet, I don't see absolutely no problem with protein powders. Other foods besides protein powders that fall in my category of good processing are mostly nut flours. So that are flours made of nuts where lots of oil or fat is removed, like defatted peanut flour, almond flour, coconut flour. They can be used for baking a lot or also for sauces. I really like using peanut sauce, which consists of defatted peanut flour, nutritional yeast, soy sauce, some spices like garlic granules or onion granules, and it makes everything taste so much better, and you don't have too much fat inside, which can actually slow down your progress if you want to lose weight, or maybe if you had already enough calories this day, it can make you gain weight if you have too much fat. That's why using defatted nut flours makes everything so much easier. And defatted almond flour is amazing for baking because it gives you also this really nice almondy flavor. The defatted nut flours have usually about 10 to 20 grams of fat per 100 grams. And if you compare it with fat content nuts have, it's like, 2 to 5 times lower, depends on the nut and depends on the flour you have. And one thing we shouldn't forget, that people started processing food to make it better digestible and to benefit from it. By people, I mean our ancestors hundreds of years ago. For example, if we take flour, refined flour, people started removing the shell from grains, like they didn't want to eat whole grains anymore, because in the shell there are often anti-nutrients or some chemicals that plant produces to defend itself from insects, to survive and not to be eaten. And these plant chemicals can often cause digestive issues in people. For this reason, I don't think that you should eat whole food all the time. I know if I eat too much of whole grains, then I get bloated from it, because there are these compounds that the plant uses to defend itself. For this reason, I think it's a good thing to have a balanced mixture of everything in the diet. And not to say, okay, refined everything is bad. It is bad to eat only refined products. But I don't think that one should eat only whole grains or only whole food products. I see also a beneficial place for processed food in the diet. Often the anti-nutrients that are present in whole food can actually interfere with protein digestion and absorption, also with mineral absorption, and people may get deficient on minerals if they don't consume enough food. That's why I don't think that there is a food that is inherently good or bad. Everything depends on the context. What you do with the food, how much of the food you eat, who you are, what is your genetics, what are maybe health issues you have, what is your goal, how well you digest the food. There are so many factors. And by processing the food, one can often circumvent some of the problems one has with the food. That's why I'm not against processed food. If you like this video, please share it with others, give it a like. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below, I'm happy to answer them. And see you in the next video.